All right. Why don't we go ahead and make a start of it? Good morning. Welcome. Excuse me. So we'll get started with a word of prayer this morning. God, we give you thanks for the sunshine this morning, the promise of the summer to come. And we give you thanks also for this chance to gather together and study your word. Be with us during our time together today and guide our conversations. Lift up the important messages you have for each one of us as we study the Holy Scripture. It's in Jesus' name that we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Right.
Did you remember to put it on now?
Yes.
Because you said you weren't going to do it in front of that camera, and then
No, I'll just edit it. I'm good.
you're all
I'm good.
right.
I'm good. I'm good. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. Worth asking. Worth asking. So we're doing 42 to 45 today. Interesting set of readings, and we'll get to those in a moment. But first, just a couple of sort of ancillary things. I've been sharing which bits of our readings appear in the lectionary, and for these 4 chapters, the only part is the first 28 verses of chapter 45, which is when Joseph reveals his identity to his brothers. So, the rest of it then is not included in the normal lectionary readings. The other thing that I looked up was we had some discussion last time about if there was any historical evidence for this famine, or was it a normal thing, or that kind of thing. So I did a little bit of looking, and this certainly is not comprehensive research here. But there was a recent issue of Nature magazine that featured an article about a mega drought that they estimated occurred about 4,200 years ago, which would put it in the neighborhood of this. Also, there is on an island in the Nile River near Aswan in Egypt, there is a stela, one of these monument marker stones called the Famine Stela, which tells the story of a 7-year period of drought and famine during the reign of Pharaoh Djoser, D-J-O-S-E-R, who reigned from around 2686 to 2648 BC. The inscription is believed to be much later, much more recent, 332 BC. So not brand new, but newer.
brand new.
But what's interesting is that it tells this long story about the heroics of the Pharaoh and saving the people and all that. But part of that story includes the high priest of Egypt having a dream in which he encountered the Egyptian god of the Nile, who explained to him how to solve the drought. So just interesting, there's a dream tied to that story. There's also evidence when looking at other Near Eastern cultures in that sort of general time frame, that there are a number of them that have stories about a 7-year famine. So the Gilgamesh epic, which I think we talked about probably way back at the very beginning, talking about creation stories, but in the Gilgamesh story, the god Anu gives a prophecy about a famine for 7 years. There's an Egyptian tale about a long-lasting drought that appears in the Book of the Temple. And that text reports about King Neferkasokar. Why would they have a king in Egypt? Well, anyway, the story is about a 7-year famine during his reign. So unclear if all those are talking about the same event, or unclear if that was just a common motif or story. But anyway, just interesting to see those different connections going on in different cultural backgrounds. So anyway, so we'll move on then. Chapter 42, it's on page 47. I guess before we start, any comments or responses anybody wants to share about any of the reading? If not, just chime in as we go. But I'll lift up a few notes that I came across. In the first verse, actually, when Jacob learned that there was grain in Egypt, he said to his sons, "Why do you just keep looking at each other?" Which is kind of a funny line. And it's interesting that it's translated that way, because a more literal translation could be, "Why do you fear?" or "What are you afraid of?" Which has a very different kind of connotation to it. So, yeah, so it's just interesting.
It seems they've got a guilty conscience. All of them.
Well,
It's apparent later, so it's
yeah.
pointing at that.
Well, and they play on
And
that.
lines on other things.
They play on that sense of guilt a lot, don't they, in these chapters? The other thing to kind of watch in this story, and I've found it's not maybe entirely consistent, but is how the brothers or sons are identified depending on the situation in which they find themselves in. So in verse 3, they're Joseph's brothers, because presumably because they're being sent to Egypt, and the narrator knows that's where Joseph is. At other points in these chapters, they will also be referred to as Jacob's sons. And so it kind of moves back and forth, and I suspect probably that's something that doesn't show up as much in translation as it would have been obvious, in the original Hebrew. So again, in verse 5, then there's Israel's sons, because in that sense they're on an errand from their father. Let's see. So in verse 7, Joseph sees them, recognizes them. And in the Hebrew, there's a play on words here, because the verb for recognize and for play the stranger come from the same root word. And so it's really a shame that we don't pick that up those kinds of things up as much, because I think there's a lot of that goes on throughout here.
Even though they bowed down, he recognized them.
Well, so think about what that is when they bow down before him. What is that?
Oh, that's
It's the fulfillment of the dream, right?
Yeah.
That they all would bow
Yeah.
before him.
So they make a point of putting that in the story.
Yes, yeah. The other thing in that little section there, verse 7 to 9, is the repetition of the verb recognize, is the same version of that verb that is used when the brothers take Joseph's bloody coat and give it to Jacob, and he recognizes it as Joseph's coat. And it's also the same word that Tamar uses in the interaction with Judah when she says, "Oh, do you recognize these tokens, you know, that implicate Judah?"
Yeah.
So again, it's kind of tying all those bits of the story together.
Is it here or later on where he doesn't obviously ever speak, he understands that if they're talking to each other,
Mhm.
he understands he knows what they're saying,
Mhm.
but they don't know that.
No,
He
he's,
says, mentions about,
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
verse
Yeah.
23.
no,
Yeah.
that's in this chapter,
Yeah.
isn't it?
yeah,
You know, so you don't know, they might have been, you know, he obviously sort of, when he says about spying on them, actually it's the reverse.
Oh,
He's spying on his.
he's kind of spying on him, yeah. Yeah, I mean, it appears he speaks through an interpreter all the way really up until he reveals himself
Yeah.
to them.
Well, they wouldn't know whether he's good at speaking Egyptian, would they? They just
No.
know he's talking in.
Well, that's right. Well, and think about our conversation last week about, you know, he would have been clean shaven, probably would have had his head shaved. I mean, the prior-
We were in church and clothes.
Yeah, and it's been, at this point, a number of years. I mean, there's probably legitimate reasons they would not recognize him, aside from the fact they wouldn't expect to see him.
Boy, wasn't he, really?
Well,
Yeah,
they don't know he actually ended up in Egypt, did they?
No.
They sold him to.
That's right.
Midianites or
yeah. So picking up on that bit about spying, because shortly that comes up, that's really his accusation. Verse 12, "You have come to see where our land is unprotected." Which again, if you kind of back up from it and look at it, it's kind of a funny, you know, these 11 guys who obviously, I mean, they don't have any food, so they're coming to beg for food. So I mean, you can't imagine they're showing up, you know, in all kinds of like warrior regalia or anything. So, but what he's accusing them of probably is a little more serious than, or they certainly would have heard it as more serious than how it sounds in our translation, because where the NIV translates it to see where our land is unprotected. For example, Alter translates it as to see the land's nakedness. And the idiom that's used there really would have been a sort of a Hebrew idiom, sort of suggesting revealing genitalia. So like, it would have been very much a violation if if someone saw you exposed. And that's what he's accusing them of, is they are really violating, Egypt is what his accusation is. But it's a stronger sense of that, which I would imagine would also then feed into their apprehension about what was going on, because if you've been, I guess being accused of spying is bad enough, but that to me sounds like a slightly more serious, sort of accusation. So in verse 20, he asks about, he wants the youngest brother to come. Why do you think he wants or needs to see Benjamin? Why is that so important?
Is it because they had the same mother?
Well, they do. They're the only two.
Two other half brothers.
They're the only two sons of Rachel. Yeah. What else? Why else might he demand to see Benjamin?
Make sure he's still alive.
Yeah.
If they did away with him, maybe
Yeah.
worried they'd have done the same with Benjamin.
Yeah.
Son of the right hand, isn't it?
I think that could be part of it. Yeah.
He's the favourite. Yeah, in a way.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think it's important to remember that distinction between Joseph and Benjamin and the rest of them. and remember the way that Jacob treats the two of them related to the rest of them, because that will come up again.
That link with the link between Jacob and Rachel in the relationship
Yeah.
as well.
Yes. Absolutely.
Sorry, going back to 18, it says, "For I fear God." Would that have
Mhm.
been Yahweh?
So throughout this, now I'll have to go back and look at that one in particular, but throughout most of this section, God is Elohim, which we talked about last time, could also mean divine spirit,
Right, yes.
because that was
I've
the
forgotten that.
that was the name that he used in conversation with Pharaoh.
Yeah.
So it's not it doesn't work all the time, but so in this bit, if you see God, that's Elohim. If you see Lord, it's
That is Yahweh.
Yeah. Yeah.
So they could have said,
I
he
forgot
meant
that,
the gods, you know.
That's yeah.
They put a capital G on it here, don't they?
Well, that's what
Yeah.
was confusing
Yeah.
with capital
Yeah.
G, yeah.
Yeah, but that is, but that's kind of going on in the background here so that it works both ways.
Really saying he's got a conscience and he respects honesty.
They must have been pretty scared, especially when they were put in custody for 3 days.
Yeah,
But it sort of reflects back on what they did to Joseph. Yeah, they put him in captivity, and now he's doing the same to them.
that's it, yeah, and kind of watch that in these next couple, when we kind of get to the end, we'll talk a little bit about that, more specifically about, maybe why Joseph does what he does, and how it plays into, was it revenge, or was it just giving them a taste of their own medicine, or, what, I guess maybe that's,
Just going back a little earlier, you said about King and Pharaoh. I'm pretty sure that when I read this in, it's one we use in church.
the
The
good
Good
news.
News Bible, yeah, I'm pretty sure that King
King,
and Pharaoh we used in
could be,
that verse.
Interchangeable.
could be, Okay, let's see,
Then it says they said to one another, so, but if they're doing that in his presence, he knows what they're talking about.
that's it,
It says that later on, doesn't it?
Yeah.
He knew what they were saying.
Yeah. So in verse 24, after listening to all this, Joseph turns away and began to weep. And so this is the first of 3 times that talks about Joseph weeping. And if you watch each time, it sort of builds on the last time. It's more profound weeping in the way that it's described. Verse 25, he gives orders to fill their bags with grain and put each man's silver back in his sack. Silver in the bags may also be serving to remind the brothers of the silver they received from the Ishmaelites when they sold Joseph. Yeah. Let's see, and then jumping ahead a little bit.
How they discovered the silver when donkey ate the grain.
Yeah.
It's a little bit of detail that they didn't.
The donkeys show up in
Imagine
interesting
a little
places.
bit of lightheartedness in the middle of this story.
Yes. There's a couple places where the donkeys kind of have that effect. I forget where the other one is, but it'll show up here in a bit. But anyway, they find that they still have the silver, and let's see, where are they? Are they back? Yeah. So they go back home to Jacob, and so in so sort of from verse 30 through verse 34, they're recounting to Jacob what had happened, what they were told, what they were instructed to do. And at that point, they've already discovered the silver. But then in verse 35, they discovered the silver. So chances are what's happened there is that there, again, were two of the different editorial traditions kind of coming together. So either that's happening and you're just seeing a little splice of two different versions of the story put together, or it could be that the brothers deliberately acted out the discovery in the presence of their father, kind of as a way to protect themselves, perhaps.
Or they didn't check the other sacks on their way home, just once.
Well, that could be too. That could be too, yeah. Yeah. So then the argument becomes whether or not Jacob's going to allow Benjamin to return with them. And we see Reuben speak up. Now, if you remember, Reuben sort of seemed to be in charge. He's the oldest. He sort of seemed to be in charge, sort of, when they sold Joseph. But he kind of disappeared at the important moment when everything happened. And so Reuben kind of pops up again and says what?
I told you. I learned two sons.
Yeah, you may put both of my sons to death if I do not bring them back to you. Now, if you think about the sentimental old man that Jacob apparently is, who's bemoaning the fact that if he sends Benjamin off, he's just going to get killed. Do you think he was comforted by, well, if they kill him, then you can kill your two grandchildren also? It's,
This is not just a turn of phrase like, over my dead body or something. It's not.
no, I don't, no. I think it's,
For real.
So Judah is Reuben then, is he?
no, no.
Well, it just says, it says, then Judah said to Israel, his father, send the boy.
Judas is another brother.
Yeah, he's different
Yeah,
brother.
oh, so he also says it as well then.
So it's sort of,
You can-
this is sort of the point where Judah sort of becomes the leader, or the
Yeah.
spokesperson, or, whatever. I mean, we've talked endlessly about all the subversion of the birth order and all those kinds of things. So you knew Reuben wasn't gonna make it long term. But Judah is the name we know, right? So Judah really kind of from this point forward, he's the lead brother in a lot of this.
The lion later on.
Yeah, yeah.
I wonder why they kept Simeon. Why did they keep Simeon as opposed to the oldest, or
Yeah,
don't know what number he is down in the pecking order.
yeah.
He was the one that was kept behind, wasn't he?
Wikipedia's got hold of them and tell you their parents.
Yeah, no, it was all covered, wasn't it, in those earlier
Yeah,
chapters? Just
yeah.
somehow.
I didn't come across anything about
Because he sits them in the-
specifically why.
Yeah, he was the one kept behind.
The other thing to note though, before going on though with this conversation is, Jacob,
It was
Second. Yeah.
Second.
Jacob says, my son will not go down there with you. His brother is dead and he's the only one left. So,
Never mind you lot.
yeah, yeah, sorry about
Yeah.
Simeon, sorry about the rest of you, but he's the only one left. Yeah, yeah. So, anyway, just interesting family dynamics going on there. So going on then in 43, it sort of continues that bit of conversation. And in verse 6, Jacob says, why did you bring this trouble on me by telling the man you had another brother? So I think what's interesting to see there is Jacob's approach is, he's kind of like a prima donna in the sense that this whole thing's about him. It's about taking his son. It's about, why did you screw up and tell him that I had another son? Yeah, it's just interesting to see, well, from someone who has a history of being a manipulator, to see him in this,
Like father, son.
well, yeah, yeah. So anyway, they have the conversation, and finally Jacob gives in. And in verse 11, he says to them, put some of the best products of the land in your bags and take them down as a gift, a little balm and a little honey, some spices and myrrh.
And twice as much money.
And, well, yes, yeah. But if you turn back to chapter 37, verse 25, we will see when they sold Joseph, that the 37 verse 25,
25.
you know, they looked up and saw a caravan of Ishmaelites. Their camels were loaded with spices, balm, and myrrh. So it's kind of the same list of products that the Ishmaelites were trading with. So whether that's just intended just to remind everybody about what was going on, yeah.
Where did they get this stash of pistachio nuts and almonds from? When there was a famine?
Yeah, that's a good question. That's a good question. So whether the famine was just strictly related to grain, which would have been such a staple of the diet that they would need it. I think the other thing that's interesting about just this whole story, kind of to that end, is we've been reading about how all these descendants of Abraham, every time they get into trouble, they wind up getting wealthier. You know, and I think the suggestion is certainly, I mean, that's Jacob's story. You know, he manipulates all these different things that work in his favor. So it would seem unlikely that they would be the ones that would have to go, you know, halfway across the known world to beg for food. But, yeah.
But they had money, didn't they? Because he's giving his money back.
Mm-hmm.
So they must have been quite wealthy.
Yeah,
They just didn't have the food.
they didn't have what they needed, yeah, yeah.
I think they were,
Yeah, it's the first time mentions money, all of it, but before that's been sheep, goats and
yeah.
donkeys.
Yeah, yeah.
And now
They
it's
just don't
suddenly
buy
it's
it.
silver. Well, they weren't miners, were they? They weren't.
No,
I mean,
no.
to mine silver, you need to, can't be a nomad as well.
That's right, that's right, yeah. So they head back down and present themselves to Joseph. He sees that they did indeed bring Benjamin with them. So the interesting thing to remember about Benjamin is at this point, he would likely have been in his late 20s. So this is not little Benjamin who's too small to go on the trip. This is, you know, so I think the way the story works, it really kind of paints that as well. This is innocent little, he may have been innocent, but I
He
mean,
was too small to be there when Joseph was
yes, yeah,
So, but not, it can't be both ways, can it?
no, exactly. So,
It's almost like he's frozen in time
yeah,
from when Joseph disappeared to now.
yeah.
He's always pictured as a little boy. Isn't he?
Yeah, well, and the language of the story, I mean, he never really speaks for himself or anything like that, you know, and
Peter Pan.
yeah, Um,
We grew up.
Yeah, so Benjamin being in his late 20s. And then really, the rest of that chapter centers around this meal. Joseph invites them into his house, which probably also scares them, because that would seem like that's a trap. Why is he inviting foreigners into his house? There's a donkey story here. Let's see.
They want to take our donkeys.
Yeah, he wants to attack us and overpower us and seize us as slaves and take our donkeys. Even the commentaries pick up on that, as that probably, whether it was added in or not, obviously is
It's
a,
a rabbi's joke.
yeah, probably.
You get it again when they took me into the house, gave them water to wash, and provided fodder for their donkeys.
Yeah.
These donkeys are obviously quite important.
Yeah.
Maybe the only
Well-
way they're going to get from A to B. So
Yeah, well,
they are.
that's it.
Sure,
Yeah.
means
You're
transport
walking
then.
then.
And then there is some discussion around the meal that the Egyptians kind of eat by themselves, and the brothers kind of eat by themselves. Excuse me.
But Joseph knows, well, perhaps we'll come to that now. Joseph tells them where to sit, and he knows who's the eldest.
Yes, he knows
Mhm.
the order.
Although, when they first appeared, I think he made them line up, didn't he? Maybe
Oh,
not.
no, because
He's telling
well,
so he
because they
obviously
say,
knows
why does he know?
exactly how
how
old
did
they are,
he
doesn't
know
he?
that we were? Because you
Yeah.
know, he might think who was the biggest, who was the
Yeah,
who looked
yeah.
the
I mean,
oldest,
they're
who
all
was the
grown men,
tallest.
aren't they?
Yes.
So he's not, in theory, he wouldn't know how old they were,
No.
but he does know how
But
old
he
they
knew
are.
their names.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
But they say, you know, they say, well, how come he's actually put us in the order of our?
Mm.
He does say they were astonished.
Yes.
Yeah, that's true, yeah.
They
Very
were
good.
astonished,
They-
but
they
he
were
wasn't.
He wasn't, yeah.
No, yeah.
Because he knew them.
Yes, exactly.
Yes, no, I see what you're
So
saying,
it's a little
exactly.
in a way, they're starting to wonder, you know, this, or he's got special magical properties.
Well, it could be. Well, and then at the end of that section then, even beyond that, again, with Benjamin, he gets 5 times as much to eat as anybody else. Which again, in my mind, you have this image of this little kid with this big, you know,
He's growing boy.
he has a growing boy. But one of the reasons that they would not have eaten together, and it does
Yeah.
mention that the Egyptians couldn't eat with the Hebrews,
Yeah.
but it had to do with lamb would have been a staple of the Hebrew diet, and Egyptians had dietary prohibitions on eating lamb, and so they would not have been eating together.
Oh, so it's the Egyptians with dietary rules, not that, they weren't
Yeah.
aware of the Hebrew dietary rules.
Well, Joseph would have been,
Yes.
yeah, so,
But whether he'd observed them, we don't know, do we?
well, no, don't know.
Chicken or nothing.
So then, in verse 44,
Sheep in Egyptian, you don't see sheep depicted in Egyptian. Oh,
no,
It's all corn and fish.
yeah. So chapter 44, Joseph puts his plan into action to essentially frame the brothers. Benjamin specifically, yeah. He talks about the chalice or the cup that they put in Benjamin's bag is his favorite. It's the cup the master drinks from and uses for divination. So if you remember last time we talked about in Egypt, sort of, I guess it would qualify as divination, but being able to interpret dreams was a science. They considered it a science, and they considered it, you didn't interpret a dream, you solved a dream. So in divination, one of the things that might have been practiced was you would, if you had that skill, you could, look at the surface of a, whatever was in the cup and,
That
Well,
reading
it's not
tea
reading,
leaves.
not reading tea leaves.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So that's what that means there. And then, so they catch up with the brothers, and in verse 9, brothers plead their innocence. We haven't taken anything. If any of your servants is found to have it, he will die, and the rest of us will become my Lord's slaves. So where have we heard that before?
Oh, with Rachel and Leah and,
Yeah, Laban looking for his stolen
Yeah.
gods.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
when they flee Laban, Rachel takes them. And the difference is, in that story, Laban didn't find what he was looking for. But obviously this time, they find the
Would this
evidence.
cup maybe have a god, Egyptian god figure on it, or be a version
very
of it?
likely, yeah.
Decorate, as part of the decoration of it?
I'm
And
sure,
so it's
yeah.
a form of an idol.
Yeah, could be, yeah, yeah. I would imagine it was ornate, I mean, it would have come
Yeah.
from
So
household
it could
of,
be painted, or if it's
Mhm.
silver, it could have been
yep, yep.
maybe cast in that way.
So they pledge themselves to become slaves or servants, and you'll see the terms sort of interchangeably here. Those two words share a root word in Hebrew. But I think probably the point of making that offer is sort of the irony of the situation that they are willing to give up their freedom to enter into some sort of contractual servitude. And it's the brothers who once sold Joseph into slavery who are now willing to basically give themselves into the same situation. The other interesting thing that happens is that shortly, so they make their speech like that, and then almost immediately, the officer or the soldier, whoever it is that's arresting them, changes the whole terms of it. In verse 10, very well then, he said, let it be as you say, let it be as you say, whoever is found to have it will become my slave, and the rest of you will be free from blame. Which is not as they say. So just, I don't know what the reason for that is, but it's just very odd that it's that. Almost immediately the sentence becomes considerably lighter, I would say. And it's really after that that we start, they take him back to Joseph's house, and that's where you really start to see Judah taking the lead on sort of the negotiations and the conversation, dialogue with Joseph. And so in the course of that conversation, Judah basically offers himself in verse 33, I believe. Yeah, offers himself as a slave rather than the boy, the 28-year-old boy.
Where are we?
So this would be verse 33, chapter 44, verse 33.
They mentioned earlier about, once again, they've got a brother who's dead,
Yes,
and
yeah,
it's making him hostage, isn't it, as well?
yeah. Well, and again, it's the irony that Judah, so if you remember the story when they sold Joseph, Reuben says, oh, let's not do that, and then disappears, and Judah's like, yeah, let's do it. And he's kind of the ringleader at that moment. And so now you have the irony that here he is, unbeknownst, having a conversation with Joseph himself, but in that same conversation offering himself up for that same sort of fate. So in 34, at the very end of the chapter, how can I go back to my father if the boy is not with me?
And they call him a boy.
Yeah, yeah. No, do not let, and I mean, life expectancy at this point would have probably not been upper 30s or 40, well, except for all the guys that live for 200 years, but I mean, the average life expectancy would not have been significantly high, so you would think, I mean, he's 28, might be like middle age, but anyway, how can I?
They don't see any contradiction in that, do they?
No.
Noah lived to 300,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
Methuselah and all these other people, so.
Yeah. How can I go back to my father if the boy is not with me? No, do not let me see the misery that would come on my father. So this is also Judah speaking those words. Don't let me see the misery that would come on my father. Judah, who comes up with the plan to have the blood on Jacob's coat and present it to his father,
Joseph's coat.
or Joseph's coat, yes. I knew I was gonna do that at some point.
It gets very
Somebody's
confusing.
Joe's.
Yeah.
It's Joe's.
So, what has happened in the meantime, in these intervening years, that Joseph's been away? What has happened to Judah? Has he accepted sort of the blatant favoritism of Rachel's sons and just decided to live with it, or is this a result of this sort of testing that Joseph is putting the brothers through, or do we see it as testing?
I'm not sure.
What's Joseph's goal?
Is that really? I mean, the way that's written, I'm not sure. Judah's actually saying he'll stay there instead of him. Is he?
Yeah.
Well, he says, how can I go back to my father if the boy's not with me?
Well,
In
but the
other words,
verse,
I just don't want to see. That would be too bad. He doesn't say I'll stay instead of him, does he?
Yeah, it says,
the verse before
may
he
be
does.
meaning that,
it
but
says, let your servant remain here
Yeah,
in place of the boy.
before.
yeah. He would rather become a slave than go back and tell Jacob that they'd left Benjamin behind.
Before.
Do you think in the back of Judah's mind, he's going back in time and he's recalling what him and his brothers did to Joseph, and what his part of it in particular,
Yeah.
taking the blood soaked to clothes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
He's
the
having
place, isn't it?
recall,
They
and we
even confess
as the
that,
audience
yeah.
know about it all.
Yeah,
In all those years, he's realised, what a terrible thing they did. They didn't like Joseph, did they? They really wanted to get rid of him
yeah.
because he was the favourite. And blah, blah, blah.
Yes.
As you grow up, you can understand how you could. If I was in that position, once they're fathers themselves,
Yeah,
maybe they see it differently.
yeah,
But when they were younger, we can understand why they didn't like Joseph either. I mean, Joseph was a
Yeah,
quite
well,
a cocky guy who,
Yeah.
Yeah.
who shot his mouth off in the wrong times. Or the wrong,
There you go.
yeah. So
Well-
they've all changed over the years.
they have, they've grown up,
Yeah,
matured.
yes. Yeah, and so I mean, so I think it's just, in general, that question though kind of hangs over this
Yeah.
entire bit of the story is, you know, we've been going on for 3 chapters now with this really kind of elaborate plan of retribution, or I'm gonna make you see the light, or, you know, I don't know exactly how to,
Reconciliation in the end.
yeah, it does lead to reconciliation, yeah. But, maybe he's softening them up so that that reconciliation is, you know, easier to accomplish. But whatever his motivation then, in chapter 45, he can no longer control himself, and he sends everybody out, and he weeps for the 3rd time so loudly that people outside the house can hear it. Let's see.
And told Pharaoh about it.
Yes, yes, and Pharaoh gives a good report. So in verse 4, then Joseph said to his brothers, "Come close to me." When they had done so, he said, "I am your brother Joseph, the one who sold you into Egypt." The one you sold, sorry, yes. So the preceding verse, he also identifies himself. So what I found really interesting in reading the commentaries this week was that this verse in particular, there was a whole lot of discussion about. It seems kind of an innocuous sort of verse. From the perspective of source criticism, which would be the different strands of writing and editing, the suggestion is this is another example where there's 2 different sources that are appearing back to back in the verses, and the first source is verse 3 is Joseph's revelation, and the other source in verse 4 is Joseph's revelation. The Midrash, which is the Jewish tradition of the rabbis interpreting texts and arguing with each other in that way, suggests that he beckons the brothers to come close so that he can show them that he's circumcised as a way of proving his identity. Which, to be fair, does not come through in that reading. Other sources suggest the repetition is necessary to convey the time that it takes for the brothers to make sense of what they've been told. And then it also, one of the commentaries also suggests that he has to call them to come close to him because after his initial revelation, the brothers would have been terrified because of fear of retribution. So just very interesting that one little verse kind of goes in so many different...
Because immediately after he said, "You're the ones who sold me," he says, "Don't be distressed."
Yes, yeah, yeah. Don't be angry with yourselves for selling me.
He really said it's God's plan that
Yes.
all of that happened.
Yeah.
Yes,
Well,
yeah,
this is where we get the idea of him being a precursor of Jesus, isn't it?
yeah, yeah.
The herald of the Son being sent.
But it's interesting, I think, too, I mean, throughout the story, Joseph credits God with the ability to interpret the dreams. But beyond that, there hasn't been a lot about God in these last few chapters. but I think that's also typical. I mean, we've talked about other bits of the story here in the latter part of Genesis where, Jacob's own story. He has the dream, he has the Jacob's ladder dream, and has that whole thing, and he has the wrestling with God at the side of the river. But in the interim, there's like no mention of God with any of the years he spent working for Laban and all that. So it's just kind of interesting how then this section very much becomes about God and God's providence and leading in this adventure.
He says, God sent me ahead of you.
Yes, yeah. So, so again, this is where I have my note about the use of Elohim. So again, because it's God and not Lord, so even in a conversation with his Hebrew brothers, he's using Elohim, which has that dual sense in the story of being the God of Israel, but also being understood as a divine spirit that the Egyptians might be able to understand. But back in chapter 43, let me see if I can find it, Jacob uses El Shaddai. Should have written down what verse it was in. Anyway, somewhere in there he will have referred to God as the Lord. Oh, it might be in
Almighty.
God Almighty, verse 14.
Verse 14.
Yeah, yeah. So anyway, just interesting to watch how those terms are used. So he reconciles with the brothers. He says, go back and get Dad. You're all moving down here. I'll take care of you. You shall live in the region of Goshen and be near me. So Goshen was a region of rich pasture land in the Nile Delta, close to the border with Sinai. And historically, nomads from Sinai were permitted by the Egyptian government to graze their flocks in that area. So kind of foreshadowing into where eventually the story of the Israelites will be taking them into Sinai.
Is it significant that sometimes Jacob is referred to as Jacob and sometimes as Israel? I mean, they seem to sort of alternate. Sometimes he's Israel and sometimes he's Jacob.
Yeah,
We've got the sons of Israel and then Jacob does this. And
yeah. I've not found much about that because I mean, even just in the last few verses of 45, in verse 21, it's the sons of Israel. In verse 25, it's Father Jacob. Jacob again in 26. And then in 28, Israel says,
I'm convinced.
yeah,
It never says Father Israel, does it?
no, no. I'll have to do some more looking on that and see if there's a consistent.
Israel seems to be referred to as being the sort of the father of a nation,
Yeah,
whereas Jacob is the father of his sons, if
Yeah.
you see what I mean. So
yeah, yeah.
one seems to be a wider remit than the other. I'm not sure.
Like a dynasty,
Yes,
like the Windsors.
yeah.
Well, and you know, if we go back to like Abram becomes Abraham, but then he's Abraham.
Yes.
It's not
Yeah, it does.
back and forth.
Yeah.
I'll do some looking and see if I can
Then in 46, it's got these are the names of the sons of Israel, and in brackets, Jacob and his descendants.
Yeah, yeah,
So
Yeah.
I think it is that Israel is the father of a nation, and Jacob is father of the sons.
yeah, yeah.
So yeah, I'm just a bit concerned where Simeon is, does he get released?
Is he still in
Yeah,
jail?
has anyone asked? He was
He-
blindfolded.
he had his- He had his 15 minutes of fame early on, and
Nobody bothered
he's
to
out of the
invite him to
story.
that.
They're all happy.
That's right.
Still in prison going, hello?
Yeah.
Yeah, very important, Simeon.
I'm sure it sits somewhere.
Joseph
Still favourites Benjamin, doesn't he? When
Oh,
he gets
Yes.
all the stuff.
Yes.
300 shekels and 5 sets of clothes.
Well, he was very glad to see him.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah,
he thought he.
Well, the other's just got new clothing, but he got 5.
yeah, yeah. Well, yeah,
And then they get their important donkeys.
you get their donkeys.
Donkeys are important.
And he says, don't quarrel on the way
Don't
back.
quarrel on the way. So,
Is that because Benjamin's got more than the others?
Same
so,
thing could happen to him, couldn't it? He could end up in a ditch.
so here's the note on don't quarrel on the way. There's been some dispute about the meaning of the verb here. It is occasionally used in context and associated with anger, and so many interpreters have imagined that Joseph is warning his brothers not to yield to mutual recrimination and perhaps fall to blows on the way home. But the primary meaning of the verb is to quake or to shake, either physically, as a mountain in an earthquake, or emotionally, as a person trembling with fear. And it is the antonym of being tranquil or at peace. In all likelihood, Joseph is reassuring his brothers that they need not fear any lurking residue of vengefulness on his part that would turn their journey homeward into a trap. So, doesn't all quite come across in don't quarrel on the way, but,
But these little details you
Yeah.
only see when you read through the whole thing.
yeah, yeah,
Simeon is given back to them in verse 23.
I thought I read it
Oh,
somewhere.
you think?
Yeah.
In
I couldn't go
43,
home.
23.
So that's
As they brought him out.
Got him out.
yes.
Hooray.
So,
43 verse 23.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yep.
That's it. I can go home now.
We can sleep
Don't
easy
worry
tonight.
about him anymore.
He's not still there.
So, yeah, so that sets us up for next week for Jacob or Israel reuniting with Joseph and their move to Egypt. So we will pick up there next week. Any thoughts or comments?
The use of the word boy is interesting because it occurs in modern history. Italians frequently refer to the son of the family as the boy.
Hmm.
But the youngest,
Probably because he has his father's name. No, not necessarily that.
But they often have the same names, don't they?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
often traditional that the father give his name to
Yes.
the firstborn
Yes.
son.
Yeah.
So to differentiate,
Yeah.
you have,
Yeah,
like you have somebody junior and
Just-
somebody senior,
Yeah.
don't
Yeah.
you?
Yeah.
yeah,
well, my
The
youngest
Americans
nephew, they
often
called
talk
him
about
Benjamin.
junior, don't they, if they put the same name.
yeah.
My youngest nephew, they called him Benjamin because he was going to be the last.
Oh,
He was going to be,
Yeah.
No.
Benjamin was the first.
We had a Benjamin, he was the 12th of the letter. He was the runt.
Sometimes the youngest in a family is called the baby.
Yes.
Family,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
know,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
My friend,
I know how old they are.
her brother was always called Sonny.
Yeah.
He was never called by his name, he was just Sonny.
Yeah, that's another.
It's just family
Yeah.
traditions, isn't it? Yes.
It's just interesting in this case how it, at least for me, it hadn't even, until I read the comment in the commentary, it hadn't even dawned on me that this was a fully grown
No.
adult,
Yeah.
you know, that it was,
Gone.
you know, little 10-year-old Benjamin, that they were,
Because the only age we get is, was it Joseph, when he actually arrived in Egypt,
yeah,
it was 30 or
He was 30.
something like that.
yeah, yeah,
So, but presumably all these, because most of these others were going to be older than him,
yeah,
so
yeah. So, anyway, just interesting, and talking about how we probably hear stories in junior church and Sunday school, and influences how we, you know, think
How
about
you
them.
picture it mentally.
That's
yeah,
it.
yes.
That's it,
And also,
yeah.
you've also got Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat.
Well, that,
I don't
yeah.
know if you knew that Thames North Synod put on a production at the Royal Albert Hall.
No,
Yes, oh yes.
No, the Festival Hall, sorry, Royal
Festival.
Festival Hall.
Yeah.
wow,
Yeah.
And a few of us from Trinity were in it, and
Oh, yes.
Matthew Woodgate was Joseph.
wow.
Oh,
I did
yes.
not know that.
Oh, yes.
Oh.
Yeah. Sorry?
And my dad died on the way
Oh,
home.
no.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, it's all right. No, I remember it very, very well.
I think it was a
Yeah.
96.
Yeah.
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 96, yeah.
It was in 96.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No,
It was quite, something.
very, very interesting.
No, it's all right.
It's
No,
online,
no,
it shows
no,
it.
absolutely.
I
Yeah.
realised before reading
The
this
story never holds any
this
difference.
verse 7,
But-
that God did all
Yeah,
of
no,
this.
I
Because it wasn't
Yeah.
before, God had all this organised.
Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah,
think that was
No,
rather,
not in it, but we all went.
you know, he's taking the blame away from
Yeah.
his brothers for taking,
Yeah.
doing all this.
yeah,
God is performing it to save everybody in the end.
yes, yeah.
You know, he's looking at the long term.
Well, and that can kind of take you in a bunch of different directions, though, to think, if God ordained all this, so God's fine with, you know, them selling him into slavery and things.
Exactly, yeah. It's
Yeah.
weird, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. Lots to think about,
I would say some people, or some traditions say, you know, put Joseph as a prototype Jesus
Yeah, yeah,
who came to save
Testify.
the world
Testify.
from the famine. But
Yeah.
presumably that's
Next you did.
yeah. So, so I did give in on the music this week, and went back to Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat. So,
It's all right. It's a long time ago.
so we'll hear the Benjamin Calypso.